Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to the FCC. It's great to see such a packed audience here for something that is going to take your minds off the fact that your pensions and savings have been decimated, and let's just focus on something that is really much more important, I think, Matthew.
Absolutely.
Which is the current state of Formula One. Now, before we start, I'd first of all just like to say, please turn your mobiles off, and an update on other speaker events. Whilst this is always one of our best sellers, it's just one of a range of events we have at the FCC. And coming up next Monday, we have a film screening, Time Still Turns the Pages, which is a drama film about mental health within Hong Kong's education system. On April the 22nd, we have a club lunch. It's called The Shipping Forecast, which is basically going to discuss the situation in global shipping, in particular with relevance to all the tariffs and all the other disasters that are going on at the moment. And then on August the 23rd, very special film night, Dateline Saigon, which is a documentary about journalists during the Vietnam War, which is, of course, something that the FCC has a very close association with. April the 30th, to round out the month, there is a club lunch, Literacy in Hong Kong, which is in partnership with the FCC's Charity Committee. And that is obviously about the various charities that work on ensuring literacy amongst our young people here. But on to today's event, and it's great to welcome back to the FCC our old friend Matthew Marsh. Well,
it's not a good way to start, is it? It's not. It's not friendly, is it?
Our friend Matthew.
Many years. Our friend. Talking about literacy in Hong Kong. We're just beginning.
Really got this going, haven't you?
My lunch didn't arrive, so I'm hangry, as they call it.
Would you want lunch?
No, it's fine. I was busy. I was talking to people. Not a complaint.
Okay. As always, a sellout crowd. It shows that the passion amongst the Hong Kong tifosi for Formula One remains undimmed. And I'm sure that Matthew will once again share his view on the stories which look set to dominate the remaining 21 races of this perhaps epic season. Matthew, welcome back. Last year, we started this event with the sport embroiled in the Red Bull scandal, but still, they were still winning everything. This season progressed to being intriguing, with McLaren scooping the Constructors' title for the first time in 26 years and setting the scenes for what we hope will be an intriguing 2025. But 3 races in, and we've had 3 different winners, which is good. But every race has been won from pole position, and apart from during the pit stops, it's been the guy on pole who's led virtually every lap. Fred Vasseur, the Ferrari team principal, he said that this season was becoming a qualifying championship determined by where you start on the grid. And for Lando and Lando, we always talk about Suzuka, great track and everything. He was saying it's now like Monaco in terms of its inability to pass. So this was supposed to be a thriller of a season. Is there a negative sentiment brewing in the paddock, and can anything be done about it?
Tim is obviously working for Formula One's PR department, as you can tell, hoping to sell tickets for the remaining 21 races. I think the context of this is that we had these years of domination of Max Verstappen and to some degree Red Bull, didn't we? And from 2021, 22, 23, 4 times champion. And I think he led the Drivers' Championship table from May of 2022 through to the end of last year. That's the domination. And last year, however, we had 7 different winners. The 4 teams, apart from there's a man called Sergio Perez, who apparently was driving for Red Bull Racing last year, but didn't trouble the podium other than in March of 2024, and doesn't race anymore in Formula One, oddly enough. And there were also those 4 teams that won races had 1-2s, and that hadn't happened since 2012. So with this being the backdrop, and now we're going into the final season of the regulations and Red Bull not winning the Constructors' Championship and so on, I think everybody expected it to be very dynamic, let's say. It's very close still, and the problem I think we have is that the downforce that the cars generate is the positive. It sticks them to the road, they go fast around the corners. And the negative is it generates turbulence. And the rules that were introduced in 2022 were adjusted to reduce that turbulence, and the cars definitely could race more closely. And there's some data about that if I remember, that it was something like the cars in 2021, if you got within 10 meters of the car ahead, you lost something like 47% of the downforce because of the turbulence, because the air is not as dense, right, because it's turbulent. It's the technical term. And then in 2022, they reduced that from 47% loss to 15% or something like that. So significant. What we've seen, though, over the years, as usual, is that every race, the teams are bringing aerodynamic developments, and the regulators haven't chosen to, in fact, trim them back. So I think we've got basically cars that generate turbulence, and I think that's why we saw at a place like Suzuka, very high speed, there's only really one heavy braking zone, which is into the chicane at the end of the lap. You know, the first turn is flat out into the first turn. That's the DRS zone, where you have that maybe a chance to get kind of alongside, but no one's braking. So I think it's a circuit anomaly as well. I think it's going to get tighter as we get to races where there's more overtaking zones and where also the tyres are more of an issue. The circuit had been repaved in the first sector. It reduced the tyre degradation lower than what Pirelli was expecting, so they could do one stop. Suzuka is traditionally a two-stop race. If you've got tyre degradation and cars are in different situations, you get more overtaking. It's kind of a long answer, but I think it's going to be an exciting season, even if it doesn't look quite like it based on what happened on Sunday.
But it's bad news about, Suzuka is always deemed as one of the great tracks. Does this mean that the old school tracks that a lot of people love, like Suzuka, Spa, etc., are then becoming no longer fit for purpose?
No, I don't think so. I think Suzuka's a brilliant track for the drivers to drive on, which is important because they're enthusiastic. It's a great place to be. I was there at the weekend. It's a great, and I recommend it. It's slightly difficult to get to compared to Singapore or Shanghai, where you can go on the train, like to the racetrack directly, obviously, but it's worth the effort. And some races are great to watch on television, and others maybe are better to watch in person because it's a different experience.
Now, moving on, McLaren, in terms of cars, they've clearly got the advantage this year, but that man, Verstappen, as you say, proved in Japan that the supposedly undrivable Red Bull is always going to be a factor. Has McLaren got what it takes in terms of both its organisation and the mentality and hunger of its two drivers to come out on top?
It's not only the drivers that are hungry today. That's what we're hearing.
You'll get your lunch later.
I didn't have to work for my lunch here. So McLaren's been transformed by various factors, but Zak Brown took over the team in 2017. I used to work for him. He's a winner, and he's been a winner in everything he does. He's been a winner in business. He generally races historic cars, but with some historic drivers in them. But he nonetheless wins races like that. 2023, because it's public record, he earned £26 million. So he's doing okay. So our sympathy for him can be reduced. And more importantly, Christian Horner earned, I think in that year, £9 million. So it must be very annoying for Christian Horner, who won both championships in 2023. And in 2023, McLaren didn't win either, and yet Zak won, off track at least. So that's the leader of the ship. Andrea Stella, who has been with McLaren for almost 10 years now, and was with Ferrari for 15 years, has 7 World Championship wins at Ferrari, drivers and constructors, and he now has a championship win, obviously, from last year at McLaren. He knows what he's doing. He's now the team principal that Zak saw and elevated into that leadership role. He was technical leader before he became now, he's the voice of the team. They've got the new wind tunnel and the simulation tools. So organisationally, it's all come on stream. And this is a company that almost went bankrupt during COVID. Many companies did, and McLaren almost did, and it had to be restructured financially, and now it's in rude health. So I think all of that is good. They've got 2 number 1 drivers, which is either good or bad depending on how you look at it. I think Lando was quoted as saying, we've got the best driver lineup and that's going to help us. But actually, I think sometimes when you're up against a Max Verstappen type situation and you've got 2 drivers, maybe you're slightly in danger of defeating yourselves. And we've seen it in the past, haven't we? With the 2 McLaren drivers in 2007, most recently, Fernando Alonso and Lewis Hamilton, being pipped to the championship by Kimi Raikkonen, because they were taking points off each other race by race, and Kimi was dominating at Ferrari and just got it. The hunger part, I think, is fascinating. The whole point of this is that I'm going to drop names, okay, So, but in a nice way, hopefully. So I had a conversation with Lewis's dad, Anthony Hamilton, at Shanghai, which was about what makes a great driver. And I said, is it not having a plan B? Because if you look at the, Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, I'm going back in time to the people that led, who would be Mansell, but before Schumacher, before Alonso, and then Senna, and so on. They all didn't really have a plan B in that they didn't have any money, basically, coming up. And so, Michael Schumacher, as a teenager going karting, would be with somebody else's dad, because his dad was making money to feed the family, so to speak. And so he had to create this shell around him as a teenager. And Lewis Hamilton grew up as a black person in the UK, which is to some degree an impediment, and he's dyslexic, so it meant he wasn't very good at school. And the one thing, I suppose, or one of the things, but he was very good at, was being a racing driver. And so Anthony's view was, look, Lewis basically lived with pressure every hour of every day, and certainly every lap of every race he did, he had pressure. So this was at Shanghai, the conversation. He just won the sprint race. So having Max Verstappen behind you, it's normal. The two McLaren drivers, Lando is brilliant, and he comes from a relatively wealthy background. So does he have that ultimate need to win? We will see. I think he's getting, if it's better, because it's not necessarily very nice, we're seeing it. We saw last year, he's quite ready now to bang into Max Verstappen when necessary, because he knows Max will do that to him.
Are they mates?
I think they are, yeah. I don't think it comes naturally for Lando to do that. That's the thing, isn't it? Max. So who's a Lando Norris fan, first of all? I'm a fan of everybody, so I'm always going to put my hand up. So we've got, and there's I think there's 100 people in the room, and we've got 20%, 15%? Some hands came down as I carried on talking. I don't know why. It's fatigue setting in. Okay, and how many people are Max Verstappen fans? Maybe less. So, the thing about Max is, he's brilliant. I think he's the best on track by a margin, and I haven't said that before, but now I'm really convinced he is, he's the best of the current, and I've got a feeling he might be better than Lewis was. I know. But if you watch him now, I think the data backs it up. He never has a bad day. He pulls rabbits out of hats. Qualifying at Suzuka, perfect example. But the point I was going to make was, he's not necessarily, in close combat, it's not very elegant, as we see. It's not very pleasant to see. It's not right, but it's very effective, because he knows the rules inside out, back to front, and he knows how the stewards are going to call it, almost always. He very rarely gets penalised, and he most often wins. And that's part of the job, isn't it, of being a Formula One driver? You need to be the best prepared, the fittest, the best team. He's a leader of people. I had a conversation, with Mark Webber, who manages Oscar Piastri. And I said, I've got this view about Max now. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, he's just the man, isn't he? And I said, not that popular. He said, A, it's not a popularity competition, and B, we misread him. Because what we see is him making throwaway lines, banging into people that we like because they're sweet, like Lando, and a bit like Lewis. Lewis Hamilton never did that to anybody, right? And Max did it to him a lot, so there's that. He said, he's a leader of people. They had spent some time together. He said he's always on time, well-dressed, very well-mannered, and that comes as a surprise, I think, to people that see him on the television or having these moments with others. I think he's a brilliant operator.
Great. Now, moving on with Verstappen in dominant car and
dominant thing.
Yeah, showing his brilliance.
I think form is the word he's looking for.
The big story over Suzuka was the revolving door Red Bull.
Yeah.
Now, is it a case of Verstappen is the only bloke who can drive that car? Because, there's been quite a few people who are, we all acknowledge, very good drivers. Yes. But he is the only one who seems to be able to make it work. Or is there a management problem there?
Yes, to all of the above.
Okay.
So I think we should take a step back on this one, because Carlos Sainz, who raced for Ferrari until the end of last year, found out on 1st of February 2024, or maybe the day before, that Lewis Hamilton was taking his seat at Ferrari. That was February 2024. So the market knew Carlos Sainz on the market, who's shown himself to be probably almost as good as Charles Leclerc, who people think is a future world champion. Carlos Sainz is available. And then on in the middle of March, 16 days after an appendix operation, he won the Australian Grand Prix. So it's looking like, oh wow, this guy's available. We should have him. Never had an offer from Red Bull Racing, as I understand it. I don't know that 100%, but I've asked a lot of people. He was never in contention for the Red Bull.
Is that because of form early in their career? That's what people say.
So the way it's been presented to some of the journalists who've told me is that they've been, the PR spin, if you like, from Red Bull is, the Verstappens didn't want Carlos. Because in 2015, when they were both rookies and they were side by side at the Toro Rosso team, it was difficult. Okay, but that's been refuted by Max's dad. They never asked us, and I don't think they really. I think Max is really bothered about who's in the other car. He knows he's better than them. It doesn't really matter. So, okay, so that's the next bit of data. And then they had Sergio Perez, who, as I said, last troubled the podium. Sergio's he's a very, very good racing driver, but in this circumstance, in March of 2024, got on the podium, didn't after that. And in May, they decided that the best way to encourage him to be better again was to extend his contract for a further 2 years. Okay, interesting. A driver who they don't need to extend the contract with, the Trumpism of he had no cards. He had like negative cards, basically. They give him a new 2-year contract, which I'm told cost them $20 million to get out of.
More than Christian Horner gets paid.
It's more than Christian Horner gets paid. And it was that because there was 2 years of him not driving and 2 years of not being able to get his personal sponsorship deals. That's a lot of money. And a 9-year-old would have worked out. Why are you doing that? Because you're going to have to pay him out. So that to me is odd. There's lots of odd things about this. And then if you're going to get rid of Sergio Perez, who won, I think, 5 races with them, and it's okay, then you wouldn't do it for either Liam Lawson or Yuki Tsunoda, because they're fine, but they're not any better than Sergio Perez. Okay? So that's, to me, the backdrop. The second problem is, the problem's the car, not the drivers, as the data shows, because the drivers that have been flicked out before, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, have gone on to be very credible team leader drivers. Gasly's with Alpine, Alex Albon, as we know, with Williams. So, okay, don't think it's the drivers. We think the car's the problem. And the evidence, again, is like, look at 2024. After the first, I think Max won 9 races last year, 6 in the first half, 3 in the second. That's a trend line, isn't it? And so we've talked about Max. So the problem isn't the car. Sorry, the problem isn't the drivers. The problem is the car. Red Bull's kind of, for some reason, excusing that by saying, but the genius boy can drive it. Yeah, okay, very good. And then I think the opinion of Dr. Marco, who does the driver selection for Red Bull, and himself, former racing driver, won Le Mans in 1971, did 10 Grand Prix, knows a bit about racing. He's 81, he's very experienced. I think he has the mentality, the Anthony Hamilton mentality of the greats don't need to learn, they arrive very fast. I agree with that. The problem is he's not putting greats in the number 2 seat. He's choosing, with all due respect to them, Pierre Gasly, Alex Albon, Sergio Perez, Liam Lawson, Yuki Tsunoda. Excellent. You don't get into Formula One unless you're excellent. But they're not greats.
But are they pushing these guys up when they're too young? I mean, if you look back at it, we've now got teenagers coming into Formula One. But if you go back to the early 90s, when you had people like Eddie Irvine, I'm not saying these guys were greats, but they were good. But they'd done their time. They'd worked in Japan for 3 or 4 years. They had a lot more life experience. I mean, isn't that what you actually need? We're putting people in who, they've done a...
Yeah.
Antonelli being a case in point. I mean, he's done a lot of mileage in an old car.
He has.
But is he ready mentally for what is now a very different business to what it was 20 years ago?
I think I think what you're saying is, are they prepared? I don't think it's really about age necessarily. It's, are they prepared? Because Max arrived age 17 and was 6th in his first race, if memory serves me. And Lewis, Lewis was on the podium of the first 9 races of his Formula One career. The greats turn up and they're either you see them winning, or that car is terrible and they're somehow they're outperforming their teammate and so on. So, to your point about Antonelli. So Antonelli is 18. He did 10,000 kilometers of testing before this year. Testing isn't allowed, but you can use 2-year-old cars and go testing. So testing is allowed, right? 10,000 kilometers, I understand, wrote off 2 cars. But that's how you do it. Write the cars off when it's a 2-year-old car in private testing. Don't write the car off at the first or second Grand Prix. Don't write off your career. Liam Lawson didn't do 10,000 kilometers of testing. Liam had only done 11 Grand Prix. So, I see no... First of all, on the Liam Lawson thing, they didn't prepare him. When I heard Christian Horner using this phrase, we have a duty of care to Liam, where was that duty of care when he should have had 10,000 kilometres of testing? Or 5 or 3? It wasn't anywhere. And the choice of Liam over Yuki was baffling because Liam had done 11 races as a stand-in in 2 seasons. It's not ideal. Yuki had done, was it 4 seasons? 4 seasons of racing. And between the two of them, it wasn't massive, but he had outscored and outqualified Liam. So let's put Liam in the, what's it called now? V-Carb or something, whatever the second team is called. Let him complete a full season, put Yuki in the Red Bull. Because that way, if then Yuki didn't perform, you have the option of we can switch halfway through the season and we've given Liam half a chance. But doing it this way around, they've blown Liam, now they've got Yuki. What happens if Yuki doesn't perform? Who's available to drive the Red Bull later this year? I don't mean me, I'm asking anybody. Thank you, at the back.
I mean, that replacement, is that young Mr. Hadjar? He's the one who seems to have impressed amongst all of these rookies. I mean, we've got a new crop of rookies, but that surprised me that he, apart from that first misstep in Melbourne, he's actually done pretty well.
Yeah, because I think he has. I think the perception with Isaac Hedjar, if you spoke to most people, or not many people, he finished second in Formula 2 last year to Bortoleto, and Bortoletto's very good. A champion in first year of Formula 3 and first year of Formula 2, I think, and that's always a good sign. But didn't ever look, I don't know, to me, and you hear him on the radio, which is, it's perception. So I think he's done, versus the perception, he's done an incredible job this year.
And the other big story of last year, Hamilton moving to Ferrari. Fine, okay, that sprint race win in Shanghai, and as you say, you chatted to his dad, and is the dream still very much alive? And what is the impact that he's had on Ferrari? I mean, Ferrari is always bigger than the drivers, and suddenly you've got the biggest name we've had for the last decade. How is all that going?
I think it's going really well. So I was at Shanghai. I went to see Mark Hines, who I think I mentioned here at the Macau lunch last year, that Mark was a British Formula 3 champion in 1998, I think it's on 1999, and then helped Lewis in his formative years, and then went on to be part of the management team. And he then went off and did help Zhou Guanyu come into the sport, and he's back now helping Lewis, particularly on the sporting side. And I asked him, I said, it sounds on the radio sometimes, there's a bit of tension. No, they get on really well. That's just the way Lewis talks. That's normal. But trust me, they've got a great relationship. He listens to both of the drivers in his headset. He says it's perfectly good. In fact, just pressing pause a second, I spoke to, as I said, Anthony Hamilton, because when we saw Lewis win the sprint race, under pressure all the way through, and it was one of those perfect Lewis or Max Verstappen or Michael Schumacher drives where not an error was made, looking after the tyres, and then towards the end the race goes away. And it's the not under pressure part. And I said to Anthony, but kind of take this the right way. But whenever I hear Lewis on the radio, he sounds a bit stressed. And it often sounds slightly, I didn't say the whingy part, but it does, doesn't it? It sounds a bit whingy. Can you explain that? And he said...
This is his dad.
This is his dad. He said, no, he's totally relaxed. That's just how he sounds. He said, Anthony plays tennis for fun. He said, when I play tennis, he said, I take breaths. I'm supposed to breathe out when I hit the ball, apparently. But I know I'm holding my breath at that moment, and I take breaths at the wrong time. I know I'm doing that. He said Lewis optimizes his breathing for the driving, as in he holds breath at certain moments. And so when he speaks, he just speaks with whatever he's got in his lungs at that point. He's not, whereas I would obviously be thinking, how can I come across as an orator? He's just speaking. The other thing about it is, I think the Lewis effect on Ferrari is many. They now serve Yorkshire tea in the Ferrari motorhome. This is a step. It's because of Mark, obviously, right? When I say they serve, I had to make it myself because he started making it and got distracted because there's always somebody who wants Mark's time. But tea is a really good thing. Ferrari have great coffee, but in the afternoon it can affect your sleep. So tea's a better thing. I think bringing some, dare I say it, Britishness. With the great years of Ferrari under Schumacher, with a multicultural approach. We've talked about this many times, German, with the Brits and so on. I think that's having a positive effect. Just Because Mark was saying, when they arrived in Melbourne, you could see everybody was like, we've got to win the race. Like, hang on, just let's get the car right.
How many races do you think Hamilton might win this year?
Oh, he's already won one. Let's not forget, he won
I know.
the second race of the season.
Yeah.
It was a sprint, but he
Still a
started
race
on the
win,
pole and won it. So he could win 2 more, he could win 6 more. It depends how good the car is, relatively speaking. The other thing that's happened is economics, which is, you know, Puma have reported they're selling 8 times as much merchandise now in 2025. Now, I'd say that's the Lewis effect. Some estimates are that Ferrari's sponsorship income, the increment since Lewis signed, is $200 million or euros. The increment, not the total, the increment. So it's good to be at Ferrari at the moment.
Yeah, well, looking at that and the economic of the sport at the moment, you know, we're possibly going into a recession, but the demographics of the fan base, I mean, that has changed enormously since the days of Bernie Ecclestone. I mean, and there was a survey done in the end, about 18 months ago, that said 28% of Americans now consider themselves to be F1 fans. Now, that'd be 72 million people, but the US TV audience is only about 1.1 million per race. I mean, so we've got a lot of people who are saying they're fans of Formula One, but they never actually see a race.
How dare they?
I know, terrible, isn't it? I mean, where are we? I mean, there's demographics, the whole sport has changed, you know, Drive to Survive, a lot more people saying that. Attendance at races has gone up.
Yeah.
Demand for races
Is up.
up exponentially. I mean, how does it all stack up with all of these people claiming they're fans but not actually going? And has
Does that bother you, that part?
It does a bit, yeah.
Does it?
I mean, has interest in F1, has it peaked?
When you went to, in 1954, when you went to your first Grand Prix, what was it like?
The first Grand Prix I went to, there was a reported crowd of 100,000 people. And that was 1977. And that was James Hunt versus Mario Andretti, Niki Lauda's the year. Hunt was the reigning world champion. You know, and it was at a proper circuit, the old Zandvoort. So, you know, it was a spectacle. But also, because there was no television, I mean, the Monaco Grand Prix was screened, the British Grand Prix would be screened, but other than that, there was never anything on TV about motor racing. There was maybe a review at the end of the year.
Right.
So there's much more access. I mean, and everybody here, I'm sure they all get their TikTok videos on their screen every morning of various clips of Formula One, and all of these sort of the Wheel Spin podcast and all the other stuff that turn up on Instagram.
His tone of voice is brilliant, isn't it? Can you, quick hand, who thinks Tim approves of social media? Yeah. Actually, at this point, I think I might ask the audience some questions. I like to do this. No, because it's good to get a sense, right? So, who considers themselves to be an F1 fan? Because not everybody may be here. I think it's 100% probably, 99, 100%. Okay, so there's 100 people in the room, 100%. There's 826 million Formula One fans in the world now, and that's a big number. But the really impressive thing is that 1/3 of F1 fans today are new. So who's a new F1 fan? Who in the last 5 years started following F1? So, I think you want to do 7, 8, about 8, 9%. Okay, so it's 30% of F1. Thank you. Later, we do questions later, madam. Sorry. We will. No, we'll come back on that. We can get on really well if you don't interrupt me. So 30% of F1 fans are new. And what's happened is we haven't lost Tim. Tim is still prepared to push a pram across the channel and watch the 1977 Dutch Grand Prix. And 3 hours of broadcast and all of those other things. But my 14-year-old daughter is definitely a Formula One fan. She never watches a live race. She might watch YouTube highlights. She's probably get some social media stuff, despite not being allowed to look at social media.
Good.
Thank you. So that's what's happening with the fan base. Apparently, more than half of that 826 million fans is in APAC, but only about 8% of the TV viewers are from APAC, which tells you the TV viewing isn't the metric. The fans are watching. I think I made a few notes about this. Some of the YouTube viewing numbers are up 25% year on year. And the TV viewing figures are up. It's slightly difficult for me to read them, but maybe up 10% year on year. But if YouTube's up 25%, fan base is up, whatever it is, then you can see that the trend is, you and I watch it, others consume in a different way, which is the genius, by the way, of Liberty Media. It's a great entertainment and lifestyle and sport. Consume it as you wish. You know, you don't have to go to a race. You don't have to watch the races live. Who identifies as a female? You get my point. You get my point. Who's women in the room? It's maybe, okay, but this is a big, I've seen a big change in the last, so there's maybe, I don't know how much, thank you for coming, by the way. There's about 10 of you, I think, thank you. And I mean that's a serious point, because when we started doing these 6 years ago, there might have been one woman in the room, so it's exponential increase. And 40% of F1 fans are female. 40% of F1 fans are 16 to 35. So again, it's that additional demographic. So thank you for coming. Please tell your friends.
And has that had a big impact on you when you're selling commercial opportunities in Formula One?
I think so, because the audience now is larger. So if you're a B2B brand, and you might have wanted to talk to people like Tim, who's the CEO of a business, he's still watching. He or she, the CEOs of business, are still watching. They're still engaged. They still appreciate and respect what Formula One means. So if a brand is associated with Formula One, that's great for the business CEOs. It's changed how I have to speak, because 1 in 4 CEOs is an F1 fan. But the number of CEOs as a proportion of F1 fans has gone down because the fan base has increased. So I have to flip my statistics slightly, but they're still accurate and true. So my point is that the B2B thing still works really well. Then there's the B2C part. If you've got young females, there's all sorts of different brands that now want to be associated. And then the other thing is that if you're a CEO of a company and you're in that sector and you go to a Grand Prix now, it's the invitation that everybody wants because everybody's there. And so it's even more valuable to people like us, if you know what I mean.
Right, so yes, this introduction of younger people who, you know, Bernie Ecclestone wasn't interested in because they couldn't afford to buy a Rolex, that actually has just enhanced the whole thing rather than dilute it.
Because, and we've talked about Drive to Survive till the cows come home kind of thing, but what's happened, the other thing that I think is important to note is that all sports sell merchandise, and typically it's the teams. If you're following football, you get a Man United shirt or whatever. Formula One is selling F1 branded merchandise. I don't see people wearing Premier League shirts or NBA caps or whatever, but certainly not in the numbers that Formula One is. Formula One has become a brand. It's become a brand people want to associate with because it's cool. And also because actually a team shirt is kind of cool, but it's a little bit, it's a bit fanny, whereas actually wearing something with the F1 brand on it, I'd wear it. I think it's cool. I think F1 is a great thing.
And it's probably got a longer lifespan.
Than what?
A team shirt,
actually,
they change.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So some numbers on that. So F1 had a pop-up store in Vegas at the Venetian Hotel the week before the Grand Prix. They sold $5 million of merchandise from a store. There was a queue, obviously. That's a store. And I think, I don't know exactly the numbers, but my understanding is 70-30 F1 team merchandise was the way it was laid out, so probably a similar number. Wow.
Right, now we had a lot of talk about the Vietnam Grand Prix, and that never came to pass. Now the Thai Grand Prix is the big story, and Stefano Domicelli, the CEO of F1, he was down in Bangkok, and everybody's meeting the Prime Minister. Lots of traction there. Do you think it's going to happen? And of course, as we saw in the SCMP on Monday, it's led to talk of, we've got to have a Hong Kong Grand Prix.
Quite right.
You were pretty negative on that last time you spoke here. I mean, any reason to change your view? And are we getting too many races in Asia, or is there plenty of growth here?
No. Crikey. He's going to cancel social media. The next thing he's going to do is cancel the Grand Prix in Asia. And he's called the moderator. There's nothing moderate about the views that are coming from my friend here. So Formula One as a platform for soft power. I spoke about this at a conference in Bangkok, just coincidentally, actually. The Prime Minister was there. It was actually coincidental, but it was interesting because as a platform for soft power, I think it's a bargain because whatever it costs per year, it's a fraction of similar platforms like the Olympics and the World Cup, and you don't end up with legacy stadia and so forth that you need to then make excuses for. It's very current. So to your particular questions, do I think Bangkok's going to happen? I think there's a very good chance because I think there's a couple of things. We've seen the CEO of Formula One has been to Bangkok at least once in recent months. the ties have come to races, senior, government minister level people. They've engaged with people whose names I recognize, who do circuit design and provide guidance on how to run a Grand Prix. This is a really smart way of going about it. If you're approaching Formula One and you say, we've got these people, and F1 recognizes them and trusts them, smart way of going forward. So I would say there's a very good chance. It's a democracy. The governments change. That could be good, could be bad, depending on how you look at it in this case. So I'm kind of at the view at the moment, I kind of pretty confident the deal's going to get done. Whether the race happens or not, I suspect might be slightly more in the laps of what happens in the country, but...
Right, let's now throw this open to questions from the floor. Jackie, you had a question to start with, so we'll give you first. There's a microphone just coming over to you.
Actually, the question probably doesn't exist anymore, but I am one of the females, so I was quite pleased that I was allowed to ask a question.
You are now.
I was trying to get an understanding of what it means, what is the fan base? I mean, how do you become a fan? I've been to many Formula One races. I watch it on the news. I kind of, have my own view about Lewis. I don't think he has a breathing problem. I think he's quite arrogant, actually. But when he speaks on the radio or whatever. So what is a fan? So who would put their hands up? How can you get proper percentage of what actually a fan constitutes?
Oh, I see. Where the numbers come from?
No. Well, how do you become a fan? If I watch and I listen, and
I see.
Am I a fan? Yes, I came here because I wanted to listen.
It's the companies like Nielsen and GWI do research where they go out and ask people, and they say things like, "Are you a Formula One fan?" And it would be, are you are you a little bit, and those sorts of things. And as we know, Nielsen does this for all sorts of topics. So that's the simple answer to your question.
So that's
it's reasonably scientifically based.
Yeah. And you'll see different sports. I drill into this quite a lot. Without naming names, there's another motor racing championship which has claimed to be, more popular than Formula One and so on. I said to my colleague, please drill into this. And he said, oh, wow, the way they extrapolate data is really quite interesting. They interview 3,000 people and then extrapolate that across 7 billion.
Is that the Hong Kong Classic Car Championship?
I have no idea. So, but, that's how. It is somewhat scientific.
Yes.
Thanks, Tim Pearson-Smith. Tim almost got an answer to the question about the potential for a Hong Kong Grand Prix. And as someone who's been sort of lobbying for this since bringing Disney here in the early noughties, and back then I know Mike Rouse, who I was involved in, paid a bond to Bernie to have a meeting. Back then Bernie said it has to be a circuit, not a street circuit. And it was interesting what Matthew just said about Bangkok, it being a circuit, or I may have picked that up wrong. To me, with everything that's happened in Hong Kong, however you call it, social unrest, whatever, COVID, doing things like drone shows and Coldplay, I don't think moves the dial internationally. I do think a Formula One, I can't think of a city better placed, if it's a street circuit, to do it than Hong Kong. Back in the early 2000s, it was the police who said, Hong Kong can't shut down, it's hard enough doing a standard chartered marathon. We've got expertise in Monaco that we could borrow or buy. What is the, do you not think this would be a great recovery for Hong Kong? I actually think GBA Olympics would be another one, but I understand that's bigger, but Formula One.
So first of all, my understanding is the Bangkok race, if it happens, will be a city centre race. And what I know from talking to the CEO, Stefano Domenicali, when Formula One looks at new hosts, number one, fan experience. And it's understandable, and maybe that has changed in the last 10 years, again, since Liberty Media took over. It just has to be a great fan experience. And city centres lend themselves to that quite well. But then we get to fact number two. It has to be sustainable in terms of the environment, which means they want, as I understand it, there's a target of 70% of fans arrive by public transport. Now, that can be done out of town. It's much easier, typically, if it's in town. And so I think the idea of where they're looking at in Bangkok, that will tick that box. Singapore, obviously, there's 2 or 3 metro stops. It's one of the reasons why I like going to Shanghai. I can stay in the centre of town, I get on the metro, and I get to the race, like to the paddock and in and out. It's super. And by the way, that's one of the things about Suzuka, which I said, it's a bit of a schlep to get to. It's worth it, but it's a different kind of experience. So could Hong Kong, Sevens was brilliant, wasn't it? Who was at the Sevens the other day? It's great, right? It was fabulous. New stadium, getting there by the MTR, it's brilliant. There's no doubt that Hong Kong can put it on. No doubt at all. You answered the question itself, Tim, because there are some obstacles to getting there. And we need people to convince the government to do it. Oliver.
Next. Yes.
What's your view on Lando versus Oscar? How's it going to shake out this year? And which driver is the future of McLaren?
Hitting the nail on the head there, mate. You're on the spot.
What's your view on that, if I may ask? Yeah, I am too. He's great. Okay. When I talk to the people who've been watching a long time, people like Joe Saywood, Adam Cooper, who've been watching every Grand Prix since they've been at every Grand Prix since 1988, I think it is, certainly in Joe's case, and Adam's a year behind or something. Joe says he sees Alan Prost in Oscar Piastri, and he thinks he's the guy, and he thinks that he has that mental thing we were talking about earlier on, that fortitude. Thank you, finally, you caught up. And actually, I asked Mark Webber this, I said, having had the conversation with Anthony about no plan B, having not any money, I said to Mark, does Oscar's family have money? And he went, not enough, but when he was in Formula 2, maybe they could have afforded to pay some of the Formula 2 budget, but not all of it, which meant that, as in Formula 3, he had to win it year one. If he didn't win it year two, out, probably, and he did win it. And so I think to that point, Now, by the way, Lando won in Formula 3, first year, and came second in Formula 2 against George Russell. So, and it was very close the whole season. So far, we haven't really seen the difference, except those moments last year. Oscar Piastri going around the outside of Lando at the chicane at Monza, taking the lead at Hungary, because that's what you do. And by the way, Mark Webber never had a plan A, let alone a plan B. So if you've got Mark as your manager, he's telling you, just win it today. We can argue about it tomorrow, but just win it. Just get ahead, because that's going to be... I spoke to Mark about, this is back end of last year, I spoke to him about some commercial opportunities with Oscar, and he said, look, the thing with it is, as you know, McLaren has plenty of sponsors, they keep Oscar very busy. We could take on some more personal sponsors, but frankly, if we start winning, we add a zero to his salary. So let's focus on being the best driver on the track, rather than kind of having an extra partner to look after. And that's a good mentality. I'm not saying Lando doesn't have that. Lando does.
And that's pretty rare amongst managers, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely right.
Who just want to get the bucks and the commission.
Exactly. That's why, having a guy like Mark on your team and Annie, his wife, it's a brilliant combination, because they say the right thing rather than what might serve them. You never really doubt.
So, it's
Can I
Oscar.
answer the question, Oscar? No, I don't want to say Oscar. I don't know.
Okay, yes, on the veranda.
Hey, great talk as always. Edson, just a quick one. You mentioned that Max doesn't care about who's in the other car. What are the advantages of having sort of a good teammate?
What is a good teammate? Somebody who's subservient?
Yes, just slightly, all the time. I think it can, that's the answer, really. When in the Ferrari years, they chose very wisely the number twos, didn't they? Eddie Irvine, very, very good racing driver, by the way, also no plan B. Great racing driver, and was never going to beat Michael, and worked that out pretty quickly, and was quite happy to do that, because he was enriching himself and winning Grand Prix every now and again, and living in Milan and having a great time by all accounts, and still is, living in now Miami and having a great time. I saw him at Le Mans last year. I was like, wow, and he looks in great shape and very rich, which I think is the important thing. And Rubens Barrichello, who was very good but wasn't going to beat Michael, but he didn't manage it quite as well because he thought he could beat him. But Ferrari, that's the model, isn't it? So I think a number two is like that, because if you've got somebody who's a bit too far off, when you've got a good car, you should be finishing 1-2. And That's not what's happening at Red Bull, and so Max is on his own. And I think sometimes it helps because they can just focus on him and he hasn't got somebody trying to overtake him. Like, it must have been slightly distracting for Lando to have Oscar right behind him during the race. I think they knew and understood that the reason that the gap was there was that Lando was trying not to destroy his tyres by being right behind Max, and he had the pace. So he wasn't going to get overtaken, but it's always slightly distracting.
Down at the front here, yes.
Oliver Ruth. Question for you, Matthew. What's your view on Formula One, well, FIA in particular, changing leadership potentially in the up-and-coming election? And second of all, the discussions of the V10 engines coming back in. Where's that going? Especially with your comment about the environmental aspects of FIA trying to go ahead.
Good topic. Thank you, Oliver. So does anybody understand? The V10 topic has just come up recently. The V10s were the engines we had a long time ago. Did anybody hear the V10 engines at track? I know you.
Sorry?
I know you did, Nicky. Put your hand up. Come on. Nicky heard them.
You're still suffering.
When you arrived at the track and you heard them, you thought, what? It's like a war zone. And at the start, it was unbelievable. It was very exciting because your body would react physically to the sound. But after about 4 minutes, it's really tedious because you can't have a conversation. And so, for me, from a commercial point of view, you take a prospective sponsor and you can't, probably quite good for them that I'm not talking. But so I think the V10 thing is ridiculous as a concept. Let's now look at because I love the intrigue stuff. Now, who's stirring the pot about the V10s? It's the FIA president and I think Christian Horner.
Hey.
Why would Christian Horner be stirring the pot about the engines? We're going into a new regulation set in 2026. Audi have come into the sport and they're creating a new. Now I'll start from the other side. The general opinion, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work it out, is that Mercedes will have the best going into a new cycle. They've had the best since 2014. They've been at least the best, maybe number 2 behind Ferrari when Ferrari had a slight problem metering the amount of fuel they were supposed to be using. They overcame that problem and they came back to being number 2. But basically Mercedes, so why wouldn't they be the best going into 2026? Ferrari will be there or thereabouts. Honda will probably be there or thereabouts. They've proven that they can do it. Audi will probably take a little while. Red Bull powertrains with Ford have no history of doing their own engines. The engines at the moment are Honda. So you'd think that it would be surprising if they did well. And then when you see that, as I understand it, the agitation is coming from that direction, you think, well, maybe they know they're not going to do very well. And so anyway, it's always a good thing politically, keep things unbalanced so that you might be able to do something. Is it push it back a year? Is it have some extra development tokens? Is it something in the negotiation? So I think the V10 thing it's happening as a conversation, but I think it's a red herring for a second. And I managed to escape saying anything about the FIA there.
Yeah, I know. That was very, very diplomatically put. Thank you. Time for one more. Yes.
Hi, Matthew. Tanya here. What's your outlook on the arrival of Adrian Newey at Aston Martin, and what does that team look like in the next couple of years? Do you see any driver shakeups or technical team movements?
Yeah, that's a great question, by the way.
Selling shares in it?
Yeah. No, hang on. There's 2 parts to that question, though, isn't there? That's why I like your question, because I was like, I can answer that one. And then I was like, it's more difficult. So Adrian Newey, I can't remember, is it 25 World Championships he's won, or some extraordinary number? And the Red Bull team going off the boil almost coincides with Adrian leaving the team, going on garden leave last April, or whatever it was. And I think there's something to that, because whilst he's known as a designer, he's a genius who apparently can see the air, people think. He's actually a race engineer. And for decades, he would be at track, looking at a car, looking at other cars, suggesting, when it's listening on the setup, he'd be making that decades of experience plus genius equals his input is really valuable. And I think Red Bull have lost that, and it makes it harder for them to overcome when the car isn't right. Aston Martin have it as of April 1, I think it was, or March 1st, recently. Now we get onto the team. I'm baffled because Mr. Stroll is brilliant and has financed the car company, the Formula One team. He's got a brand. He's got a brilliant commercial team. They've got, it's part owned by Saudi Aramco. This is deep pockets. They're developing fuels to go with the new Honda engines. They've got the Honda. They've got all of the bits except the drivers, which are kind of important because. But here's how good is Fernando Alonso? And so I've had these conversations. You know, one person I asked, an engineer, said, still there or thereabouts. Okay. Another person I asked, who's a manager of a driver and used to be a driver himself, and if I said, how would he look if he was up against someone, let's say, like Oscar Piastri? Not pretty, mate. I just used
We know who you're talking
I just
about.
used an Australian accent. So, and he's not getting any. Fernando, like Lewis, will be getting slower every day. Not by much, but will be. Because it happens. He's 42 or something. This is 40. It's bound to happen. And they've got Lance Stroll, who's very, very competent, but isn't a benchmark. So we don't know how good Fernando is. We don't know how good Lance is. They've spent tens of millions of dollars, and the execution is going to be poor. I don't get it. So I can't, other than I don't get it, I don't know how to answer.
Will Honda insist on a change? Will they insist that they drop Stroll and put Tsunoda in?
That's the Perez-Lawson thing. Oh, okay, fine. No, they can't either. I mean, they might insist dropping Alonso and putting Tsunoda in.
No.
Okay, no. I think they've got a fundamental problem there. And it goes back to what makes a good number 2 driver. You need a driver who's pushing the other one so that they arrive every day. It's only people like a Max Verstappen and a Lewis Hamilton, really, I think, and a Michael Schumacher, who can do that all the time to themselves, the super self-critical. Otherwise, you need a guy next to you who's making you look silly if you're not exploiting every detail.
Right, we're running out of time, so we'll bring this to an end now. Just with one thing, we've just been talking about Aston Martin, and of course they are all from across the road at Silverstone, where the Jordan factory was originally. Since you last came here, we've sadly lost Eddie Jordan, one of the last great privateer entrepreneurs in Formula One. Could that ever happen again?
So what you're saying is that teams now are more corporate?
Yeah. I mean, now you've got to have a manufacturer. You've got to have that corporate structure. It's 1,000 people at least, well, with most of the teams, whereas Jordan was just sort of a happy band of campers in a lockup when they started.
But I think yes is the simple answer, because it might have been smaller before, but you still needed that individual who had the drive, who would find the money. It's what Eddie did all the time. He was constantly, putting together the money. He would get the best driver, and now I need to find the money, because typically the best driver, as we learned earlier, doesn't have the money. So put the money and the driver together, and it takes a guy like Eddie Jordan to do that, and that's why his team was successful. If you're reliant on drivers bringing money, you're limiting your pool. So I think Toto Wolff is like that. He's an entrepreneur who happens now to run the team called Mercedes. He's a shareholder, but it was his entrepreneurial attitude. Fred Vasseur runs Ferrari, but he had his own race team, and he has a business that produces race cars. I mean, he's definitely on. Christian Horner, absolutely entrepreneurial. So I think it's slightly different, but the CEOs are cut from the same cloth, I think is the answer.
Right, well, we're going to draw a line under that, because it's now the witching hour. Matthew, as always, thank you very much. And we look forward to having you back here. So please, thank you to Matthew Marsh.
Thank you very much. Very good. Good fun.
Thanks a lot, mate.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you back at the FCC very soon. Thank you.